Hello, this is Michael DeBishop, and this video will serve as an introduction to Wisconsin and federal statutes and regulations. It's part of Module 1 of the MCW School of Pharmacy Wisconsin MPJE review. So first, let's start with our State of Wisconsin statutes and regulations. What is a statute versus a regulation? As review, regulations are also known as rules. So statutes are pieces of law that are passed by Congress at the federal level or by the legislature at the state level. Specifically in Wisconsin, the legislature is composed of the Senate and the Assembly, and both houses must pass the same form of a law. It's passed by Congress or the legislature. A bill is signed into law by either the president at the federal level or the governor at the state level. These statutes then represent the law governing that particular jurisdiction. So in the case of a federal statute, it would affect the entire U.S., or in the case of a Wisconsin statute, the state of Wisconsin. Often, these statutes provide authority to agencies or boards to enact regulations and rules. Now, regulations or rules, as they've been referred to as well, are created and promulgated by agencies or boards. They have a very lengthy and complicated process to go through to be created, reviewed, and approved. Regulations will provide further detail to statutes and typically focused on the implementation of each statute. They are subservient to and cannot conflict with the statutes. However, in practice, when we are looking at statutes and regulations, both have the force and effect of law in their application, and we must comply with both statutes and regulations when we're practicing pharmacy. Within this course, where can we find the appropriate statutes and regulations? Within the Moodle site, there is a Law Resources module that has links to all relevant state and federal statutes and regulations. Happily, these are very available on state and federal websites. I've also included PDFs of each of these documents in this Law Resources folder. The state of Wisconsin maintains nicely hyperlinked statutes and rules on their state website. And again, you can find those links in the Law Resources folder or actually on the Pharmacy Examining Board website as well. So as we are reading statutes and regulations, I highly recommend that you read the appropriate statutes and regulations for pharmacy, both when going through the study guide and as a study tool, just kind of reading through each body of statutes and regulations. What are some of the things that you should keep in mind as you're reading through? First of all, reading through them requires a very logical mindset and detail orientation. And so there are a lot of excepts and unless and withouts, and many things are defined in the negative. So you need to apply, some of these logic rules to those. And in addition, there are many words in there that are times when one word can change the meaning or statute or regulation. So be very logical and detail-oriented as you're reading them. Each chapter and section often has a definition section at the beginning of it. And so reading through these and understanding what the definition of various terms are can be helpful. Sometimes there are terms there you don't realize that they are defined legally. And within the statutes and regulation, those terms will have that legal definition only. Okay, so an example would be dispense and deliver. So in 450.01, dispense and deliver are defined in their legal terminology. And so knowing this helps to understand what is meant when those terms are used later on in that statute. In Wisconsin, again, statutes and regulations are hyperlinked to each other, so many times they will refer to different statutes or different regulations and incorporate those. And so I highly recommend at least trying to click on those hyperlinks to understand what each, when you see one, what it's referring to. And then finally, and unfortunately, sometimes they're not always black and white. Sometimes they are a little bit vague. Sometimes they conflict slightly with each other. And we'll try and work through those within the course as well. So, which Wisconsin statutes are we most concerned with for pharmacy? There are two. One is Chapter 450 of the Pharmacy Examining Board, and this contains most of the statutes governing pharmacy practice and is probably the most important statute for us to understand. There's also a Chapter 961, which is our State Controlled Substances Act. And this contains controlled substance schedules of various substances. It talks about prescribing practices of various controlled substances, and it authorizes the Prescription Drug Monitoring Program, or the PDMP, in our state. There is a long section on violations and penalties, which you generally probably don't have to get into, but it's there for your interest. But again, 450 and 961 are the ones we're going to use most. So, what are some of the Wisconsin agencies that we should know about? Well, first of all, there is the Department of Safety and Professional Services, or DSPS. They handle all types of professional licensure in Wisconsin and serve as a home for the different boards that are created in Wisconsin, including the Pharmacy Examining Board. If you see department referenced in the statutes or the regulations, so just the word department, it typically means the Department of Safety and Professional Services. In Wisconsin, the Pharmacy Examining Board, or PEB, is our state board of pharmacy, and the PEB drafts and enforces pharmacy regulations. In Wisconsin, we also have a Controlled Substance Board. And this Controlled Substance Board is responsible for administering, creating rules around the State Prescription Drug Monitoring Program, or PDMP, for controlled substances. And one of their other big functions as well is to recommend substances for the controlled substance schedules. So 3 Wisconsin agencies to be aware of: DSPS, PEB, and the Controlled Substance Board. So where can we find our Wisconsin regulations? These are contained in the Wisconsin Administrative Code. Again, they are linked on our website or on our Moodle course. Pharmacy, or FAR, has 19 chapters. CSB has 4 chapters. We're primarily interested in Chapter 4 for that one. There are various other Wisconsin regulations that are present that also affect pharmacy, some in different professions. These will be called out in the individual study guide. In 2025, we expect revisions to several chapters by the Pharmacy Examining Board. FAR 7, the Pharmacy Practice chapter, will have some updates to many different parts of its regulations. FAR 8, Controlled Substances, will have some updates to changing information on controlled substance prescriptions, partial filling,
and a couple other things. Emergency rules are in place to this effect through April 2025, and the permanent regulations are expected to take place sometime this year. FAR 15, our compounding regulation, is currently undergoing revision as well, and will be incorporating USP 795, 797, and 800 by reference, as well as including stipulations for flavoring. Again, this is in the development phase right now. Note that in all cases, current rules, as listed on the Wisconsin website, are tested on the MPJE. And so not upcoming rules, not emergency rules, but current rules. And that is what is reflected in this course. The course will be updated when new statutes and regulations take effect.
So with all this going on, how can we keep up to date? Here are 3 sources that I recommend for keeping up to date. One is the Wisconsin State Legislature. You can go to this website to sign up for notifications on legislative and rulemaking proposals and actions. Another is the Department of Safety and Professional Services. You can also go here and get updates on the actions of the Pharmacy Examining Board. These do not come out very often, but when they do, it's important to know about them. And finally, our state society, the Pharmacy Society of Wisconsin, is a great organization to join. They put out a weekly newsletter called Fast Facts, and it will typically contain any important updates regarding pharmacy regulation changes. Okay, so let's move to our federal statutes and regulations and point out some of the important ones that we're going to be working with. On the statute side, obviously the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act is the overarching statute for our profession. Generally, state law regulates pharmacy practice, whereas federal law will regulate the manufacture and labeling of drugs. However, DEA, as we'll see later on, also affects pharmacy practice and its rules related to controlled substances. So most of our federal statutes are part of now the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. There is the Controlled Substance Act, which established our Controlled Substance Act schedules and is in effect for many of those requirements. And then finally, the Poison Prevention Packaging Act, which we'll discuss later on in Module 5, typically affects us when we are deciding what type of container to put a prescription in and what type of closure that it requires.
The Code of Federal Regulations, or CFR,
contains all federal regulations. And for our purposes, the most important ones will be contained in Title 21, Sections 1300 and 1321. And these are regulations that are promulgated by DEA and are contained both on the DEA website and in any compilation of CFR regulations that you will find. A great resource for these, for pharmacists, is the DEA Pharmacist Manual, which is a more or less plain language compilation of federal statutes and DEA regulations relating to controlled substances. So I highly recommend becoming very familiar with this manual. The DEA put out a new version in 2022, and that is what we will use to refer to in this course. Again, you can find this pharmacist manual on file in our Law Resources section of the Moodle course. Okay, so what do we do when Wisconsin and federal requirements conflict, which they do sometimes, or they're different? The general rule of thumb is to always follow the stricter requirement. Whether it's state, whether it's federal, whichever one is stricter, you have to comply with both requirements. Okay, so always follow the stricter requirement. For example, DEA requires maintaining controlled substance prescription records for 2 years, right? However, Wisconsin and our state statutes, we require maintaining all prescription records for 5 years. So we have to keep them for 5 years, which satisfies both DEA and Wisconsin requirements. Occasionally there's a state law where the federal law is silent, or vice versa. So again, we have to follow whichever requirement is stricter. An example here might be PDMP. So Wisconsin requires PDMP entry of all controlled substances prescriptions. Federal law has no such requirements, but we still have to follow that Wisconsin rule. If you have any questions or comments about statutes or regulations, please don't hesitate to post a question in the question forum on the Moodle site. You can find it at the bottom of the site, and you can email me as well. If you find anything that we missed, please let me know. I'll be happy to take a look and revise the course if needed. Thanks for watching this video on Wisconsin and federal statutes and regulations as part of our MCW School of Pharmacy Wisconsin MPJ Review Module 1. See you in another video.